The house stood at the end of Blackwood Road, shrouded in mist and shadow. Even in the dim glow of the full moon, its outline was jagged, broken, as if the house itself had been wounded by time. Its windows gaped like empty eye sockets, watching, waiting. No one had lived there in decades. Not since the Caldwell family disappeared. The stories varied. Some said the family fled in the night, driven mad by something lurking within the walls. Others whispered that they never left at all, that they were still inside, trapped between the living and the dead. Ethan, Claire, and Mark had heard the tales all their lives, but they weren't afraid. They were young, reckless, and in need of a thrill. It was Halloween night, and they were about to make the worst mistake of their lives. The wrought iron gate groaned as they pushed it open. The air smelled of damp earth and rotting wood. Dead leaves crunched under their boots as they made their way to the front porch. Mark hesitated. "Guys, are we really doing this?" Ethan grinned, hoisting up his camera. "Come on, man, we have to. $100 says we can't spend an hour inside." Claire rolled her eyes, but smirked. "Easy money." The front door was ajar, just slightly, as if inviting them in. Ethan pressed his hand against the old wood and pushed. The moment they stepped inside, the temperature plummeted. Their breath came out in misty puffs. The grand foyer stretched before them, frozen in time. Chandeliers coated in cobwebs hung from the ceiling. A massive staircase curled up into the shadows. A dusty mirror, cracked down the center, reflected their blurry figures. A portrait hung on the far wall, a woman in a black Victorian gown, staring down with cold, knowing eyes. A whisper slid through the silence. "Welcome home." The door behind them slammed shut. Claire yelped, spinning around. Mark swore under his breath. "Wind," Ethan muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. But there was no wind, and the house was just beginning. They moved deeper into the house, their flashlights casting long, stretching shadows across the floor. The first room they entered was a study, its bookshelves still lined with dusty tomes. A fireplace sat cold and empty, the ashes undisturbed. Mark moved toward a desk, running his fingers over a stack of yellowed papers. "Guys," he whispered, "look at this." It was an old, unfinished letter. "To whoever finds this, she won't let us leave. We tried everything, but the doors..." The sentence ended in a long, jagged slash of ink. A sharp, scraping sound echoed from behind them. They spun around. The door they had entered through was gone. In its place was a long hallway stretching into darkness. Claire gripped Ethan's arm. That wasn't there before. Ethan swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. Maybe we just got turned around. But they hadn't, because the study was still there. The room hadn't changed, only the exit. The whispers started again, low, insistent. "Go back. Turn around. Leave while you can." Mark's hands trembled on the camera. "I don't like this." Ethan squared his shoulders. "Let's keep moving." The hallway stretched on forever. At first, they tried opening the doors along the way, hoping to find another way out. But every doorknob was ice cold. Every door was locked, except one. At the very end of the hallway stood a single wooden door, slightly open, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Something was waiting. Ethan pushed it open. Inside was a bedroom, eerily untouched by time. A canopy bed stood in the center, draped in sheer white curtains. A wardrobe loomed against the far wall. An antique rocking chair sat in the corner. It was rocking. Slowly. The whispers rose. Claire grabbed Mark's wrist. "We shouldn't be here." Ethan stepped forward, flashlight aimed at the chair. It stopped rocking. A cold breath brushed against his neck. "You shouldn't have come." The wardrobe door burst open. A shadow lunged. Something cold wrapped around Ethan's wrist. He screamed. The others yanked him back, slamming the door shut behind them. They ran. The hallway had changed again. Now there were faces in the wallpaper, stretched, twisted, their mouths open in silent screams. A single door loomed at the end. It swung open. The room beyond was massive, too large to belong in the house. Moonlight streamed in from an unseen source, and in the center of the room stood her, the woman from the painting. She was dressed in black, her face pale as bone, her dark eyes locked onto them. Ethan, Claire, and Mark stood frozen. Then she smiled. It was not a human smile. It was too wide, too wrong. The walls shook, the whispers became screams. The woman moved without moving, her feet never touching the floor. Claire sobbed. "We have to get out of here." The door behind them had vanished. Ethan's flashlight flickered. And then, suddenly, they weren't in the massive room anymore. They were in the foyer. The front door was right in front of them. It was open. Beyond it, the night was waiting. They didn't hesitate. They ran. The moment they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them. Silence. The house stood still, empty, lifeless. Mark gasped for air, clutching his camera. Ethan turned, breathless. "We made it." Mark stared at the camera screen. It was glitching, and then a single frame, the woman in black, standing right behind them, smiling. The whispers rose again, and then the front door creaked open. The three of them stood frozen in the cold night air, their hearts hammering like war drums. The camera in Mark's trembling hands continued to flicker, the image on the screen distorting. But that single frame of the woman in black remained. Her hollow eyes bore into them. Her smile widened. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were outside, yet the house still called to them. The front door had creaked open again, just a sliver, an invitation, a dare. "Tell me you saw that," Mark whispered. Claire was gasping, her fingers digging into Ethan's sleeve. "I saw it. We all saw it." "We need to go," Ethan said, forcing himself to move. "Now." But as they turned toward the gate, the night wasn't the same anymore. The trees that lined the property had twisted into gnarled, unnatural shapes. The fog thickened around them, swirling like something alive. The road they had walked up was gone, vanished into an endless stretch of darkness. Mark spun in a circle, panic creeping into his voice. "Where the hell is the road?" Claire pulled out her phone, trying to call for help. No signal. She lifted it to use the flashlight, and the screen glitched. A video began playing on its own. It was them, but it wasn't live. It was footage of them, inside the house. Only in the video, there was something off. They weren't alone. Behind them, in every frame, the woman in black stood closer and closer. by the last clip. She was right behind Ethan, her lips nearly touching his ear. Then the screen went black. Claire dropped the phone with a strangled scream. "Stop," Ethan growled. "We have to focus. We're just freaking ourselves out." Mark turned back toward the house. "Are we?" The house had changed. The windows were glowing faintly, like candlelight flickering inside. And then the front door slammed shut, but something moved behind the glass of the uppermost window. A figure. Number 3 figures. Ethan's stomach dropped. They looked just like them. Exact replicas of Ethan, Claire, and Mark stood at the window, staring down at them. The doppelgangers' faces were eerily blank, except for their eyes. Their eyes were empty black voids. Then, in unison, they smiled. Mark stumbled backward. What the actual hell? The doppelgangers raised their hands and pressed them against the glass, except their fingers were too long, stretching unnaturally. And then they waved, as if saying goodbye. Ethan yanked Mark's arm. "We're leaving. Now." The 3 of them bolted for the gate. The moment Ethan reached it, an invisible force slammed into him, knocking him back to the ground. He hit the dirt with a grunt, pain shooting through his ribs. Mark tried next, but the air thickened, pressing against him like unseen hands, shoving him away. Claire screamed, scrambling back. "It won't let us leave." A lullaby floated through the air, faint, sickly sweet. The front door of the house creaked open again, only this time it wasn't an invitation. It was a demand. The wind howled, the fog slithered, the whispers turned into voices. "Come home. Come inside. You were never supposed to leave." Mark clutched the camera, his breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. "What do we do? What do we do?" Ethan forced himself up, his head spinning. His instincts screamed to run, but there was nowhere to run to. Then Claire noticed something. The mirror in the foyer. Through the open door, she could see it, the cracked antique mirror, and in it, the woman in black was watching them. But she wasn't outside. She was inside the reflection. "That mirror," Claire whispered. "She's trapped." Ethan followed her gaze. His mind worked fast, piecing it together. If she's stuck in the mirror, maybe... He didn't get to finish. The ground beneath them shifted. The dirt collapsed. Something was pulling them back. A force like 1,000 hands dragging at their legs, their arms, their very breath. They were being sucked toward the house. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive. Ethan fought against it, clawing at the ground. His fingers brushed against a sharp rock. A weapon. His mind screamed a single command. Break the mirror. He grabbed the rock and hurled it with everything he had. The rock struck the glass, and the mirror shattered. The house screamed. A horrible, inhuman wail split through the night, shaking the walls. The entire house shuddered, like it was coming apart from the inside out. The force yanking them backward snapped. The fog lifted. The night air shifted back to normal. The road reappeared. The house was silent. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Mark let out a shuddering breath. "Holy shit." Claire was shaking. "Is it over?" Ethan didn't answer. T front door was gone. The entire house had sealed shut, like it had never been open in the first place. No invitation, no escape. It was over. They stumbled away from the property, never looking back. 3 weeks later, Mark finally worked up the courage to review the footage. Most of it was corrupted. Static, warped audio, footage skipping like a broken tape. But one frame was clear, one single, perfect image. It was the very last moment before they ran. In the image, Ethan, Claire, and Mark stood on the front porch, their backs to the house, and right behind them, standing in the doorway, was her, the woman in black. But this time she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, barely visible in the shadows, were 3 more figures. They were identical to Ethan, Claire, and Mark, only their eyes were hollow, and they were smiling. The house had let them go, but something else had taken their place.